Good morning. My name is John Swaine. I'm the CEO for the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, and it's a pleasure to be visiting you from the United States and to be with you for this conference in Johannesburg, South Africa. As you can see in our international gallery here, we have an exhibit up for Helen Suzman and Nelson Mandela. I had become aware of the activism of Helen Suzman as being a primary person to help have Nelson Mandela released from prison after 46 years. I'm looking forward to this conference and the questions that you will have at the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you all in Johannesburg, South Africa for this conference, but as you can see, this exhibit in our international gallery helps me to be very connected to this conference. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. proclaimed that he had a dream for a future civil rights nation if the United States finally honored its solemn promises to vindicate human rights, it was obviously not about something that showed up in his subconscious while he was asleep. It was a picture of a possible community whose distance from immediate presence did not make it any less real or visible in the mind's eye. One powerfully meaningful capacity for making art is to sketch a plausible picture of what the world might look like if our civil justice propositions were implemented. This would surely be better than just hopeful words alone. The people want to be able to see themselves in a secure context of enlightened human relations. A picture, as we know, is worth 1,000 words. But we must convert this slogan into a test of human imagination that can project from a passive state of affairs as we now experience them into a practical application of honorable promises. In the United States, as we teach these ideas at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina, where the nation's sit-in movement began on February 1, 1960, when 4 black college freshmen sat down at a public lunch counter where African Americans had previously been excluded. The long-delayed national implementation of the third constitutional founding of the United States after the Civil War in the mid-1800s requires more than composing and then ratifying a fine set of words. It requires a concerted process of envisioning, crafting, negotiating, and finally composing, of the sort that the creative founders of the past have carried out in order to bring their words to life. This is about seeing a possible future, and it involves visual thinking. What I am saying here, and what we are committed to at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, is that this involves an additional social value to be ascribed to the arts. How do you get people to see what the world might look like if we were true to our official promises? Now, I know and appreciate that the first and probably most important thing that thoughtful people usually say about the value of arts to an enlightened civilization is that they are the ultimate expressions of human freedom, both individual and collective. But we need to recall constantly that when the makers of art are suppressed, a society has started along its final path toward absolute authoritarianism. So it stands to easy justification that the protection and advancement of the capacity for creativity is a background condition for civil progress in accordance with the protection of human rights. What I am saying here, once again, and what we are committed to at the Civil Rights Museum, is that this might mean an additional social value to be ascribed to the arts. This is not simply about exploring incidental associations between the arts and civil rights. It will require looking into the deeper dimensions of human freedom and civil envisioning. Included here would be an attentiveness to the fast evolving issues of public art as related to community expression and public education. Can we set an agenda to examine the variety of ways in which we might cultivate the civic imagination to transform and implement our understanding of a national community of equals? This would represent a nation's ultimate contribution to an enlightened world civilization. You might be wondering what I mean by this idea of envisioning a newly built community based on more enlightened human relations. A picture, we all know, is worth 1,000 words. But we must convert this slogan into a test of human imagination that can project from a passive state of affairs, as we now experience them, into a practical application of honorable promises. At the F.W. Woolworth's landmark in Greensboro, about 6 years ago, as we marked the milestone of settling financial obligations that we had incurred to create the Civil Rights Museum, we wanted to embark upon a new stage of development. We decided to establish what we call the Initiative for the New Constitution of the United States. We knew we were approaching the 150th anniversary of the fundamental constitutional changes that settled our Civil War and ended the formal slave regime that had existed since 1619. Now, I realize you all may be wondering, how is it that something that's a century and a half old can be considered new? But I'll bet you understand too that new isn't only a matter of age, but also a novelty, innovation. And our 19th century Constitution of full and equal citizenship nests in fundamental rights of personhood for everyone in the country is just as new now as it was back then. And especially so since we still haven't come to terms with implementing the solemn promises made back then as a condition of bringing the country back together. You may be aware that our civil rights movement of the 1960s was motivated precisely because of this nation's abject failure to honor the words we said we cherish after the war, a century before. They were, after all, the response to the largest bloodshed in our history, sacrificed at our own hands. So our museum committed itself not only to remember and cultivate the visionary values of the civil rights movement and the key sit-ins that took place in our building, but also the deeper commitment made in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that reconstructed our Constitution 100 years before that. These are formative changes that still beg to be realized in our own day. Now, just so you'll know, I get some of these perspectives from our principal scholar at the museum, who is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He heads that initiative, and he's tried to teach us that you don't change the world with just powerful words. A real constitution must change the way people frame what they believe and how they see. And that's where the arts come in, the way I've suggested so far. What I understand is that this envisioning of a new world where the words will finally be true, or at least more true, requires creating a picture of possibility that you can actually live in and prosper. In the end, we ratify this new Constitution by seeing ourselves walk around in it, and that can be accomplished through all of these arts: drama, music, dance, painting, drawing, written compositions, and so on. Picture the thought, my colleague would say. For us in the United States, part of what has held us back from moving into an already chosen future and scripted is that we haven't adequately composed this picture. We still need to become better artists of possibility. And that's what we are committed to at the Civil Rights Museum. Now, you all know very well that the Republic of South Africa has some exquisitely fine words in your own Constitution. You also know that stellar South African visionaries like Helen Suzman, Nelson Mandela, and Bishop Benjamin Tutu have lent perspectives from their transformative humanism to energize the social progress of my country. No doubt, the promising words of your much newer Constitution will be given substance and energy by the creative artistry of South Africans. I look forward to your visit to the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. Thank you.